here we are, Talbot Street.
Everybody's come through the doors of this building, haven't they? And all sorts of things.
Yeah, they've come through for the complaints, confessions to murder, and of course Jerry Hutch snuck in this building as well late at night one night and did an interview.
And flowers.
And flowers.
Don't forget the flowers, because we're going to tell all these stories at the Cork Podcast Festival, which is our show's actually on the 30th of March in the Opera House. Tickets are on sale from the corkpodcastfestival.ie, and they're selling fast. We've only got, 2 weeks left?
2 weeks left, yeah.
Absolutely everybody's talking about adolescence, and we actually just spent the entire practically of our lunch with another colleague discussing it. Anybody with teenage boys are terrorised, and those with teenage girls are, also a bit terrorised, to be honest with you. I did say there, is it one of these things? It's causing a little bit of mass panic, I think. Now, the drama is obviously unbelievable. It is so hard-hitting. The story, the reveals, the slowness of how it handles the effects of this, sort of like it's a rock dropping into the middle of a pond, and it's the ripple effects, isn't it? Owen Cooper stars as Janie Miller, and he's the boy, the 13-year-old boy, who's essentially been online and has developed a mindset that results in him stabbing to death a schoolgirl who has rejected him as such.
Yeah.
But so this isn't a regular thing, first and foremost. I think a lot of the time when people get, very worked up about issues, they think this is going to happen to them. And it's a little bit like when you find a woman is attacked by a random stranger and killed, and women will become slightly hysterical because that's their worst nightmare, I suppose, and they think it's going to happen. But the fact of the matter is that is a very rare crime. This is a really rare crime, what happens in adolescence.
Yeah. It's a rare crime for a teenager to kill another teenager in this manner. Of course, it's not unheard of. People will obviously remember the case of Anna Kriegel, who was stabbed to death by two boys of a similar age. I think they were 13 and 14, only ever known as Boy A and Boy B. That happened obviously in Dublin.
In 2018.
2018. So there's adolescence, I suppose. It's brilliant for a start. I mean, you can't. Everything about it is so gripping. But I suppose it tries to. Is it really trying to explain how a child can do that to another child? And it does happen, but it doesn't happen much. You're 100% that is the case.
But I suppose, in a way, if the makers went out to sort of try and focus parents' minds on what's going on with their teenagers, that has worked, because all of a sudden people are realising, well, I don't know what they're looking at online. I don't know what they're looking at on their phones. And there's a very poignant scene at the end of it, really, when you go into the child's bedroom and he is at this point has admitted his guilt.
Yeah.
And the bedroom is like any boy's room, and a child is loved.
Yeah.
You can see that from the bedroom. There's stars on the wallpaper, there's matching duvet cover, and in the corner lurks this giant screen, a gaming chair, and obviously where this child has really lost himself and gone into a very dark world, so far away from his family values and everything his parents hoped from him.
Is that what it's all about? I mean, like, I suppose my son watched it, actually, my teenage son, and I asked him about it, and he had a different perspective on it. Like, first thing he was saying was, he expected a plot twist, I think, for the kid to have found not to have done it, But I was trying to say, well, it's about what makes a killer, what makes a teenager a killer. And obviously, we have various politicians, Irish politicians and others, coming out and saying this should be required watching, sort of putting it back on, parents giving access to the internet to kids. But if it was just, I think the message of it is actually a bit deeper in that you see there's a lot of things that create that killer, including messages on the internet, absolutely. But also you see him in a school that looks like more like a holding pen for bullying children, where teachers are stressed out and unable to deal with it. You have, I mean, the real drama of it, if you ask me, is watching, I mean, maybe I would think that watching the dads, played by Stephen Graham so brilliantly, and he's the co-writer, watching him look at what he did with his own son, even though he clearly loved him, and the child clearly, looks up to his dad or wants his dad's love. And so it's about the parenting, about the school, about the society, about all of the things that
there's
cause
all sorts of suggestions made along the way about his father while he's being examined by this psychologist. And, is the father violent? Is he this, that and the other? He's not any of those things.
No.
He's a guy who brings his son to football, and the son isn't particularly good at football and he can't look at him. Now, both of them make that observation, both child and father. It's a moment that could happen in any...
It is.
In any father and son. And I think also, he talks about his own guilt about it, is that the business took off and he, what did he do then? It's so normal and regular that it's in itself is frightening. There's obviously a very sensitive child there at the centre of it. There is all that bullying in school. There's the fact that he's not good at sport, the fact that he's a little boy who isn't, one of the popular kids, and the girls aren't looking at him, and he's not getting all the pretty girls. I mean, that is a kind of a case that we spoke about there. It goes way back. It isn't kind of modern because of the digital world, but I think that scene at the end, and there's the father goes in and he looks at that computer, and that computer, it's like as if, what did he get on that? It's like as if it's the enemy. And then, of course, on the bed is the child's teddy bear, which he places under the covers in a very dramatic and moving ending to the show.
But just earlier, he had sat with the mother, and they cried, and the mother had said, they'd asked, "Is it their fault?" And she'd said, "It's not our fault." But they'd also come to say, well, I think it's okay to say we could have done better.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying, obviously the message is to do with the internet and to do with the access to these cultural messages, but it's the reason it resonates so strongly is because it is a polemic, about, but there's something about the child has become disconnected along the way. So, all the way along through not just one thing, through a lot of things, and that's why it works. So it's so powerful. Look, I know it's obviously too late to say spoiler alerts, but the final episode where you're looking at that family, and do you remember the bit where they're saying, "Let's start the day again"?
Yeah,
and just that constant pressure and the attempt to be good and kind to each other.
Yeah,
but then the pressure always pushing them into anger and upset. It's just so...
and that was actually one of the themes of it, because there's a lot of themes. We'll probably get more practical about talking about it after we've described those bits that stand out for us. But one of the themes there, I think, is the impact a crime has on the perpetrator's family. I thought that was a very powerful piece of drama that we don't often see. We don't often consider that.
Yeah.
I mean, look, there's two cases in Ireland that are, I'm not saying similar, but they involve teenagers who have committed acts that you just don't believe teenagers can. There's the Anna Kriegel case where she was lured to a disused building and she was murdered by two 13-year-old boys who remain nameless and are in the prison system, albeit in the juvenile system. And there was a second case which was involved the victim, Stephanie Ing, she actually survived, but just about. And she had been lured by a younger boy who was a juvenile at the time. I think he claimed he was older than he was, and he invited her on a date and he brought her to attempt to bring her into a disused building, first of all, and then brought her down the back of Dunleary Pier, where he slit her throat from ear to ear and stood back and watched as people went to her aid and all the rest of it. And I think a follow-up arrest and searches and what came out in court, although he has never been named and won't be because he was a juvenile, was that there was a lot of kind of drawings and writings and evidence in his house that this was a plan.
Yeah, so, I mean, these cases, as I said, I mean, if you could go back in history, they have always happened. I remember growing up, the Jamie Bulger murder in the UK, they are really, really uncommon. I mean, for teenagers to commit those acts. That case that you're speaking about with Stephanie Ng is back in the Supreme Court this week. It follows on from another case that came to the Supreme Court involving Cameron Blair, that there was a lot of publicity about it. A case where the defendant, another teenager, had brought a case in relation to his anonymity and other issues. So adolescence comes in the middle of these things. One of the determinations from the court regarding the Cameron Blair case was that previously and in the Anna Kriegel and in some of the other cases, if the sentence for murder is a life sentence, but if somebody has been a juvenile, they can get this automatic review put into their sentence. Now, the Supreme Court has made a decision that isn't constitutional and that sentences are going to have to be looked at in a different way. So, I mean, these are all complex issues.
And the focus in relation to the perpetrator, that the individual convicted for the Stephanie Ng attack, is the fears of the judge was that this is somebody who may be released without supervision and that the judge can do nothing about it. Now, it's complex and it's going to be called again, but it's, it is one of these legal situations that has come up that has focused attention on this sort of thing. And I think the judge said that this is a case that's screaming out for the likes of supervision, that the parents of this individual aren't left to just totally supervise.
No, I mean, what normally happens with teenage killers when they do arise is they have these automatic reviews. They get a life sentence, but they have these reviews built in. So you're not looking at a child, a 15 or 16-year-old committing murder and spending the standard, I think, is 19.2 years in prison. There would be an expectation they would get out. Now, at the moment, they go back to serving a normal life sentence at the moment, any teenage killers, because those reviews have been removed. But it probably will see them coming back to court again and having, further cases where their sentences are reassessed in some way, or the government may feel obliged to bring in legislation. I mean, these things are very technical, but I suppose you can see from the case involving Stephanie Ng that there's mental health in the background, mental health issues, and obviously, like, is adolescence. Speaking about adolescence, it's so powerful. It's a polemic, and of course, the child, Jamie, who commits the murder, is not from a deeply traumatized background. I mean, I think a lot of the child killers that come before the courts come from a place of deep trauma. But it's.
Well, I think in relation to the real life situations that we've spoken to, I don't think that is the case in either of those cases.
No, I don't think it is. Now, there can be mental health issues, except for nothing to do with trauma. The Anna Kriegel case,
family backgrounds, I think, seem to be very secure and steady in all those cases. Yeah. I think it probably holds up a mirror to society, does it not? And to the emerging, the struggles of a teenage boy within that society. And it certainly is leaning into the whole Andrew Tate, that whole narrative about women that's coming from a very powerful group of men who are, who are a voice for teenage boys, whether their parents like it or not. Because that's the kind of stuff they're finding and they're being drawn to, I think.
Like, I don't disagree, but I do disagree in a bit, right? Like, they are being drawn to that, okay? So there's no doubt about that. Like, I thought some of that was a bit blunt actually in the program, because it's more complex. Like, I have two teenagers. Your kids are slightly older, but so they receive stuff on the internet all the time. They don't just watch it and think this is the truth, They receive all sorts of things from all sorts of angles. They're in schools, they're being taught all sorts of different values in their schools. My kids are being taught all sorts of things, values about LGBTQ community. They're also getting opposing messages maybe on the internet. They're getting all sorts of messages from their friends. Like, they're not stupid. Like, they assess it all, and they don't just hear something and go and kill somebody. So, but there is no doubt that there is an escalation in alienation from young males, right? Like, that is a worldwide problem. So if you look at across the Western world, boys now routinely do worse academically than girls. I mean, that's just a fact of life. So what is happening? Like, I do look at, I've seen loads of politicians come out now over the weekend, the last couple of weeks, going on about adolescence, as if, influencers are the problem. I mean, this is the society these politicians have created, by the way. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I don't know whether that's the case. I think it's that are we not looking at, or are we not talking about a situation where a child loses their way? So they aren't just every child has been hit with stuff. There are kids who do lose their way and who do seek out answers and who do believe what they're reading, and they're drawn to this stuff. I don't think everyone that Andrew Tate hits with TikTok is going to accept and believe it.
No.
But I think there are certain teenage boys out there who are a little bit lost in space about their masculinity, feeling a bit rejected. Maybe they're not the best looking, the strongest, whatever of the year. And they're drawn to that because it gives them...
it gives them an ideology for...
But it also gives them a club and a gang to belong to, which is all they're really looking for.
But can I say though, right? Like, if you look at England in the 1980s, right? When we were young, right? There was
around.
So there was an explosion of football hooliganism, right? Now, there was no internet at the time, but there was a huge amount of football hooliganism, and young boys were being dragged into that. Up in the north, you had young boys joining paramilitary organisations. So the alienation has always been there, or it's becoming increasingly there with young men. Now, if you get rid of TikTok and Instagram, or controlled it and monitored it, which isn't a possibility, are you still just going to be left with that sense of alienation?
Well, I think kids have always felt alienation. I mean, we're looking back to, even the movies of the 80s and the 90s, and I suppose the St. Elmo's Fires, and all those sort of movies were really about fitting in school, and the biggest stars of the baseball team
and
were the guys.
The battle for prominence and position.
And the girls would be popular, and the prettiest girls would be popular, and everybody else felt left behind. Nobody else was prom queen.
And they were mistreated. I mean, that was always through those films, The Breakfast Club and all. It wasn't just that there were some popular and some that were unpopular. It was that the unpopular kids were being mistreated by the popular. So, like, it is, in fact, in Adolescence, do you remember the bit which I thought they were drawing a deliberate distinction? Do you remember the bit where she's talking about the dad when he's at a teenage disco and he's wearing a wig and bowling shoes?
Yeah.
And they're basically, I thought the point they were trying to say was, back in the day, people were much freer and they were less self-conscious, and teenagers could be teenagers, and there wouldn't be like an ongoing bullying. Or
you can make a show of yourself and nobody had it on film.
No, which is true.
Yeah.
But like, if you remember back to those days, it was still still a snake pit. I mean,
absolutely,
Like, let's not pretend. Look, but don't look back and think it was. I mean, in some ways, it was brutal. So, like, I'm not saying, like, I agree with you that people young men are being fed toxic, irrational.
Unregulated.
Unregulated, but also untruthful, loads of stuff.
Yeah.
The problem is that that's not all. Like, it's not if you stop that, things are okay. There is a problem. Do you know what I mean?
Well, you're saying that, but you're saying there always was a problem.
There always
you had
was.
to cope with it in different ways. So there wasn't this online sort of toxic diet that you could take that would make you fit in somewhere. That didn't exist.
No, I think social media and all of that, they have exacerbated the problem. But there is a problem in society where you can see it in voting patterns. I mean, you know, the voting patterns of young men and young women have absolutely diverged in the US for the first time. I don't know if you saw those statistics where in the last general election, the amount of young women voting Democrats was something like 80%. But traditionally it was always, the figures were more or less the same for young men and young women, but they've totally diverged. Now, you can blame all of that on Andrew Tate, but I'm not sure that's the case. Do you think so?
No, I mean, I don't, but I do think that and again, going back to Adolescence, that it is a drama.
Yeah.
That is a very big sort of
that is
shadow in it.
Look, no doubt. I mean, look,
the idea that he has felt left out and he's gone online and he has found this arena where he then is, whether you call it brainwashed or something, but he's convinced of this, toxic, I'll call it, male, and that, if a girl rejects you, you attack.
Yes.
And obviously this results in him, he stabs her to death, I think, doesn't he?
He stabs her to death. I mean, he stabs her to death. I mean, it's such a, look, I'm obviously 49. And you see...
And a good bit.
And no, still definitely in my 40s, right?
Yeah.
But he's actually having his 50th birthday there. You see that?
So that's so connected with this.
And then he has a boy and a girl in.
Yeah.
So, and like it's like it's pumped at us, really, isn't it? Like, you know what I mean? Now, I mean, it's brilliant, so I'm not knocking it, but it's pumped. It pushes emotional. It's just like somebody sitting there pushing an emotional button every second. It's because it preys on that fear where you don't, that you don't have control of this young person that's in your life, or the full control. It preys on those fears, doesn't it? But it's brilliant. Like, it's a brilliant debate to have.
You end of the teenage years and you realise that, you thought you were on top of it a bit. You weren't. Hadn't a clue what was going on.
But these struggles have always existed. But I suppose most people come through their teenage years. I mean, if I look back on the things that I saw around me as a teenager, like, like, it was crazy. And everybody, I'm sure, could say the same.
But it's incredible when a drama, has the kind of impact that this one has, because it's such a powerful medium drama.
It is.
And, there's so much stuff out there now.
Yeah.
You look through your Netflix, your Sky, your Paramount, whatever, your Amazon Prime. There's so much content out there.
Yeah.
But this one came in with such a huge punch.
Yeah.
Because it reflected and it held a mirror to what is going on and those issues.
It does hold a mirror. And every... now, I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Is it the Rorschach test or something? So it provides that where, you're in a psychiatrist's office and he shows you an ink stain and he asks you, what do you see? And you see this and I see this. Do you know that?
Well, I haven't been in a psychiatrist's office yet.
Well.
But I can tell you there's many people who think I should be in one on a daily basis.
Yes.
And maybe I kind of feel myself, I wouldn't mind.
So it's a thing where it's an idea that but that you've seen it on TV, and the idea is that everybody sees what they want to see in a program like Adolescence. So if you're a certain mind, you see Andrew Tate, or if you're of another mind, you see, whatever you want. And in fact, there's a huge debate online from the far right. Did you see this? Where they're saying that the original child was meant to be played by a black child, but they got rid of it because they're anti-white stuff, or I don't know.
Right.
It's absolute rubbish. Like, really. So everybody sees what they want to see in it. but that just shows you how powerful it is, because it doesn't.
Let me tell you, you two were rattled there today.
No,
I was sort of a little bit more comfortable because I sort of through the fence.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought you were both quite rattled, and some people are going to attempt to make very dramatic changes to things, and because of this, and it's so in the ether, which is a good thing that it's in the ether. It's a good thing that's been spoken about in the Dáil. It's a bit. I don't know whether it should be the schools that should be looking at this. I think it's the parents.
I don't think. No, I think as well. It's look, I think it brings up issues for people. Of course it does, but it's powerful. But yeah, I mean, if you look back at the history of the cases we're talking about, and we discussed it before we came on air, I mean, you can pull out this terrible, terrible handful of cases over a couple of decades. And most people come through their teenage years unscathed.
Absolutely,
and there's ups and downs, and you come through, and the kids are great, and
they eventually reveal some of the stuff they were at.
Yeah, and ultimately it probably wasn't as bad as what I was up to myself, and that's the truth.
Funny enough, yes, I often think that myself.
Yeah. And look at us.
But yeah, but I think definitely the idea of that perpetrator's family and the effects, I think was such a worthwhile aspect of it, because you kind of tend to immediately blame the parents, don't you?
Of course you do. And in fact, people will have seen it. It's all shot in one shot. So it doesn't break at all. But that last episode where the parents are, the car is vandalized, the van is vandalized, and then they go, like, all of that is in real time, and it's so oppressive. And you just get a sense of, this is what people living with that kind of public shame, or whatever you want to call it, just the burden it must place on them.
And still loving your child, no matter what they did. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And, always having to second guess yourself. But the bit that I actually found the most heartrending bit of it is where he's saying, can we start our day again, or whatever? You know what I mean? Let's start our day again. We're like, they're broken.
Yeah.
And they keep having to try and start it again. And look, it's I mean, we've ruined it for anybody who hasn't watched it.
Sorry about that total spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're a loser if you haven't watched it. Half the world has. Have they?
Yeah. I think they have. I mean, it's one of those programs. I mean, if you think back over, I think it was The Family. Do you remember that Roddy Doyle program that really sparked the national debate? I remember that, about domestic violence, and some programs do. But yeah, the one thing that you do think is, or I thought watching it is, I wouldn't go back to being a teenager for love or money, I have to say.
No, it's hard times. It's hard.
It really is. And you have to look at them and think, they're great. They survive it. And, the other bit of it is, there's obviously the fears of it all gone wrong. But when you deal with your own, you see they're brilliant. I mean, they're so resilient, and they're so capable of getting through all sorts of, way cleverer and way stronger, and still a good laugh in the middle of it all,
Yeah. Right. Well, listen, anybody who hasn't already watched it, you pretty much have there now, but still go tune in. And there's loads of stuff there. As you say, people take different things from it.
Yeah. And have
different experiences with it.
And that's what shows you why it's such a good drama.
Yeah.
Because if everybody couldn't take something different from it, it'd be too basic.
Exactly.
It's just a really simple message, but it's not.
For sure. Okay.
Thanks, Nicola. Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.